Hello and welcome to the Deb Calvert channel here on Bright Talk. I'm Deb and I'm really excited to be working with you today. I want to let those of you who are new to Bright Talk, I noticed several new subscribers. If you're new to Bright Talk, you will want to know about a couple of the features. The first one is that if at any point you have trouble with a tech issue, use the orange button that says Get Live Support Now, because the Bright Talk team, they're really, really good and they're very responsive, and they'll do a much better job than I can in helping you get any tech issues figured out. Secondly, I will be referring to these as we go, but I want to point out the bar called Attachments and Links. When you open, good stuff there for you, including the slides from today's presentation. So if you want to grab those and print those, I know some people like to take notes right alongside the slides. They're up there for you. And I'll point out others as we go, but everything there is free, and it's just to enhance what we're talking about today. So help yourself to anything that you like there. Last but not least, let me point out the bars that are questions, your questions. I would like to encourage you to post those for me. I'll try to answer them as they come up in the natural flow of our progress here. I'll leave time at the end to answer any last questions that come in. And if we don't have time, or if you don't want me to respond to the full group, just say so. And either way, I will email you afterwards. I just want to be sure to answer any and all questions that you post. Today, I think you post your tips for other people. I'm going to give lots of suggestions, but you might have some of your own that would be of benefit to others in the group. So all in, please. If you've got some other information, I'll be glad to share that. I appreciate you extending what I have to offer. Okay, let's get started. As I said, I'm Deb. My name is Deb Calvert, and I'm president of People First Productivity Solutions. We do all sorts of work related to people processes so that organizations can build strength from within by putting people first. And I also do a lot of coaching, and I want to point this out today because of our topic. Executives, senior managers, and C-suite executives in all different types of organizations in various parts of the world. And the reason I mention that today is because it's really relevant. This topic, the one we're covering, about being an introvert and how can you be successful in business meetings, that's actually a pretty common topic for the people that I coach. Despite their seniority and their experience, they still sometimes are very uncomfortable in business meetings because of their preference for introversion. It's actually a big misperception out there that to be a senior leader, somehow you have to be an extrovert or you have to get a personality transplant so you act like an extrovert. That's not accurate. To be as successful as you want to be, a better choice is to know yourself, to accept your own preferences, and to learn how to leverage those, and sure, to extend so that you are able to accommodate others with their preferences too. But it's not about pretending to be something that you're not. So let me just disabuse you of that notion before we proceed, because that's not what we're after here at all. In the attachments and links, I have also given you a place to go on LinkedIn so that you and I can connect. I'd really like to do favorite things is to have discussions that come out of these webinars, one-to-one discussions, where I answer questions that are more suitable on a one-to-one basis. So by all means, let's connect over there. Now let me start here, because I know that sometimes this term, introvert, extrovert, it has some myths and misperceptions around it. So I'd like to talk first about whether or not you are an introvert. Just because you're attending this webinar doesn't mean that you have to be. Maybe you came because you work with people who are introverted and you yourself are coaching them or are helping them to find some ways to be as effective as they choose to be in business meetings. Or maybe you're someone who simply doesn't have an organization don't speak up and don't seem to be contributing as much as others in meetings. So we're going to talk about all of that. I want to give you this list of some classic indicators that you might be an introvert. You won't necessarily have to check all the boxes. The best way to tell if you or someone else is an introvert is actually, let me just speed you along to the very last bullet. The main way that you can tell is by how somebody needs to recharge their batteries. In other words, how they need to go and get energy. Because in a typical workday, a lot of us might seem like extroverts. We might be perfectly adept at speaking up when we need to, even at making big presentations in front of a large audience. Maybe we're very good at speaking up in meetings or at jumping into conversations. Maybe we are nimble and flexible when we're in those public spaces, and we do just fine socializing with others. See, most introverts do. They know how to do those things. They just require a different type of energy in order to do those things. Now, let me step back and give you an example of what I'm talking about here. I happen to be someone with a preference for extroversion. I'm naturally an extrovert, I suppose you'd say. So when I go to a training session like yesterday, where all day long I'm with a big group of people and I'm on stage, if you will, and even at the breaks and lunchtime and before and after, I'm doing a lot of heavy interaction with people. Because I'm someone who has a preference for extroversion, what that means is that at the end of the day, just like anybody, I'm a little tired, I'm a little mentally fatigued, and if I'm going to go get more energy as an extrovert, I need to be around people. I need that energy to come from more time with other people. Unfortunately, yesterday I had to get alone in a rental car and make a 2.5-hour drive back to Midway Airport. Traffic was bad. I was in the car for a long time by myself, and it was maddening because I wanted to recharge my batteries by talking to people. So you can feel sorry for the people at the airport and my seatmates on the plane who got all that pent-up energy as I was just all over the board talking to anybody and everybody who would listen. Now, an introvert would have a different type of a need. After a long day, just like the one I described, with people all day long, an introvert would actually enjoy that time alone in the car, or time alone, or with a very small group of people that they're close to be able to get back into a fully recharged state. Somebody with an introversion preference would typically need to take a little space away from others. They wouldn't want to continue being on as long as I might. So some other ways you might tell if you're an introvert, but that's, by the way, that is the best way. So if you don't know if you are, think about what I just mentioned. And if you can't tell if somebody else is, you might observe for that characteristic. Where do they go in between meetings, with other people or with time on their own? Another hallmark is that introverts tend to prefer expressing themselves either in writing or after they've had time on their own to gather their thoughts. Whereas extroverts, they are thinking aloud. As new thoughts come or as they're preparing, they're doing it with other people, they're talking about it, they're almost thinking in real time as they express those ideas. So you might look for that. Now, of course, what this means is that in meetings, people with an extroversion preference almost can't stop themselves. They can't help themselves. They just blurt out ideas before they're fully formed. And to people with an introversion preference, that seems a little hasty and risky and maybe even irresponsible, because introverts, those of you who tend to be introverts, you tend to want to think about the idea and fully form. Now, what I'm giving you are some very big generalities. These are tendencies. And there are times when people who are one or the other, introversion or extroversion preference, they might look a little different. So let me give you one other personal example before I move on. If you were first meeting me at a big conference or at a networking event, if you were first meeting me there and I had just entered and you observed me for the first, 5 or 6 minutes, you would probably think that I'm somebody who's introverted. Because although I'm extroverted, I'm an observer at first. And I'm not ready to jump all the way in and initiate conversations from the minute I walk in. I like to scope out the room. I like to sort of get a feel for what's happening and who's there. And I'm thinking strategically about how I want to budget my time and who's there that I want to be sure to talk to. So initially, I'm not going in and fully into what looks like an extroverted mode. And there are other facets of introversion and extroversion, just like that one. I work a lot with the tool called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, and it breaks all these facets down in detail. But I say that because I wouldn't want you to assume from any one behavior or situation that you can tell if somebody's introverted or extroverted. Okay, well, let me give you a few other differences between people who prefer extroversion and people who prefer introversion. This comes directly out of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator material. It's a great tool for being able to do some team building or being able to understand yourself or others. I really like it. I use it a lot. And if you're interested in ever talking more about this in detail, just let me know. Now, here's what's really also important. We're not branding people introvert or extrovert. We're not labeling people this way just for the sake of being able to label them. The whole point is so that we can be more effective in understanding and communicating with others, knowing our own preferences, knowing how those might differ from other people's preferences, and then being able perhaps to meet in the middle, or being able to find people who are unlike you because they will make the very best thought partners that you'll ever have. They see things differently. They do things differently. One other misperception that's out there that I need to address before we go any deeper, and it's true here in the United States, it tends to be true that there is an unspoken expectation that people are going to act extroverted in a whole lot of jobs. When you walk into a meeting, when you go into an interview, when you are doing any people-facing, customer or internal people-facing work, there's this unspoken expectation that you're going to be a people person. You're going to easily and naturally, maybe even charismatically, interact with other people. And so for a lot of people who have an introversion preference, that accidentally sends a signal that suggests your own personal style is not adequate. And that's not true. When I talk to people who don't even realize they're projecting this signal, they usually feel terrible about it. And they don't mean to be doing that at all. They just don't understand the difference. But here's some really, really good news. This is not true globally. And here in the U.S., this is beginning to shift. There's a lot of research about the differences between how introverts and extroverts are perceived. And introverts in most parts of the world are perceived as being more thoughtful, more deliberative, and coming out with better reasoned and better crafted arguments when they do speak. You've probably even noticed this in meetings that you've attended, whether it's you or whether it's someone else. When the person who doesn't speak up as often jumps into the conversation, people really pay attention. They notice, and they usually appreciate that very much. There's a really good book. If you're interested in reading more about that research I mentioned, a book called Quiet. The author's name is Susan Cain, C-A-I-N. And if you're somebody who likes that sort of research and wants to see how some of these shifts are beginning to occur worldwide, and how introversion is beginning to be more not only accepted but appreciated, I recommend that book. Okay, now let's get into the meat of the subject here. So let's say you are an introvert or you know one, and it's now time to go into a business meeting. Of the introverts that I've spoken to at all levels of organizations, these are the things they tend to say most often when they talk about why they don't like being in business meetings. Of course, they feel like they're a waste of time. That's true for everybody. But introverts in particular, they say that what's uncomfortable about business meetings is that people seem to expect that they immediately contribute to the conversation before they've ever had time to process what's already been said or to reflect on and craft their own opinions and ideas. And they're not going to do that out loud. They're not going to do that by talking about it. They will do that, the processing, the crafting, the deciding on an opinion. They're going to do that in their own head, not out loud. Meetings don't typically lend themselves to letting people take space and time to think before they speak. And if people take time to think before they speak, well, an unfair assumption gets made that they've checked out, that they're not paying attention, that they're not participating. And you and I know that that's not true. So if there's ever that sort of misunderstanding, that tool I mentioned called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, the little workshop that goes around that and the assessment, it's fantastic for helping to address some of those misperceptions and to help people find their way back to a more productive type of meeting where there actually is time and respect for people to think things through. Now, extroverts, another thing that introverts don't like is that extroverts are doing all that thinking aloud. And they'll just put ideas out there before they think them through. And sometimes that looks like a lot of wasted energy and wasted talk time. Sometimes it looks like it's ego-driven. There are all kinds of misinterpretations and judgments, both directions. Sometimes introverts think that extroverts are being just irresponsible with the things that they say without thinking about them first. But you see, extroverts, they need that. We need time with others to voice our ideas and to let them take shape with an exchange. And so just like introverts have certain needs, so do extroverts. The idea here is not to judge either, but to understand both. Now, of course, if you're someone who would like to think about ideas and process them and access all the huge database of files that's in your head, thinking about your previous experiences and putting ideas together, well, the typical business meeting, unfortunately, isn't structured that way. There's an agenda, there's a time frame, and everyone comes into that meeting looking to race through the agenda items, often moving just a little too fast from one topic to another. People don't even have time to think about their contribution, let alone make their contribution, and that's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way. Some good discussion within a team can change the way you structure your meetings. Now, this next one is also really unfair, and it's more American than it is in a lot of other places. And that is that people, when you leave a meeting, what people seem to say if they're giving a compliment is they seem to say, hey, that was a really great idea. Or they say things like, oh, you're so quick, you can really think on your feet. They don't usually say things like, you are such a thoughtful thinker before you respond, or you listen really well, or I like how you take time to mull things over. It almost sounds like we value the efficient and the public versus all the rest of it, even though both have merit and both are needed within any team. So it is unfair. It doesn't have to be that way, but this is one of the things that introverts tend to dislike about business meetings, along with, for some, being in the spotlight, being the center of attention is uncomfortable. And speaking up within a group, especially if you feel raced to do so, pressed urgently to contribute something before you fully thought it through, then you might not like that pressure. So why even bother going to the meeting? I think that's a fair question. With all these things that you dislike, especially if you're not going to get to think about your contribution and craft it, why even bother going to the business meeting? Well, I can think about two good reasons. The first one is to stay informed on who's saying what and how things are ebbing and flowing and whatever informed if you're at the meeting. And secondly, you do have a contribution to make. Your thoughts, your ideas, when they come out, they can steer the conversation, they can shed light on another way of looking at a situation or a problem, and you can make an impact. People have invited you to that meeting because they want your expertise and your experience and your thoughts. You might want to think about ways to insert yourself sooner in the meeting and to use your voice. I've given you in the attachments and links, I've given you an infographic about using your voice, and there's also a webinar here on this channel about using your voice. So think about accessing some of those kinds of tools, or even one-to-one coaching if you think that would be of value. Now let me give you 3 strategies to make meetings a little easier for you and to make sure that you're able to contribute in them and to get what you need. The first strategy, well, this is just a good practice for any team. If your team isn't doing it, go to the team leader, the manager, whoever conducts that meeting, and explain why you and others with an introversion preference would benefit by getting the agenda in advance. But not only that, everybody else on the team would benefit too. They would benefit directly because they also come prepared to the meetings. But they benefit because if you're prepared, if you've had time to develop your opinion and to think about what you might want to contribute, if you've had time to think about that and then you're more likely to contribute, that does benefit everybody because now your voice, your unique perspective comes into the mix in a way that it might not have if the agenda was sprung on you in the moment and you had no time to work with it ahead. Now, of course, this isn't meant to suggest that you should script an entire presentation or go above and beyond doing a lot of extra work. No, it's just so that you can have time for that preliminary reflection, still listening in the meeting because other people are going to present different information and you'll stay nimble. It's just that you'll mentally have that thinking and processing time, that preparation time that gives you access to everything you need for that preparation and that comfort level to be at the right starting point for you. And for introverts who have tried this one strategy alone can make a huge difference in the ways that they enter into those meetings. Here's another strategy. Along the same lines, it's about telling people what you need. So you'll tell them that you'd prefer to have an agenda. It's a best practice. But let other members of your team know. Let them know before, let them know during the meeting. Bring all the people who tend to be more introverted together, and maybe you can work together to educate others about why it's a good idea to give what you need so that you can contribute the way they'd like in exchange. If during a meeting a really important topic comes up and you don't want to answer on the fly, you want to deliberate. You know that your contribution will be better if you have time to process. There's absolutely no shame in that. It's a good thing. You could be modeling that for other people too, and they could benefit by understanding it. But they'll never know unless you tell them. So to be able to say during a meeting, I believe this is a very important topic. I believe that there's a lot I could potentially contribute here. I need some time, though, to reflect on this, to process my thoughts and pull the pieces together. I'd like to suggest we table this until our meeting next week. Or I think it's a good time for a break in this meeting. 5 minutes right now would be a very good break. For those of us who need a little time to think, we could do that. For those who don't need that time, well, perhaps you could have a bio break. You'll know your setting and your situation and your people best, but ask for what you need. Now, when people don't seem to understand and they're going really fast, one of the other things you can do is just put a placeholder, almost like putting a bookmark in something before they get all the way through the agenda. You could say something like, this item, agenda item number 3, it's important to me. I'm not prepared yet to offer my thoughts, but before we finish the meeting today, I'd like to come back to this one. So whatever it takes, you're going to express what you need. You'll educate the team if it's a team that gets together over and over again. And the more you do this, the more accustomed people will become to understanding some in the group are going to be able to contribute more and get more out of it if we allow some time that isn't public and isn't moving fast. Last but not least, let me give you this strategy. This is about that idea of recharging yourself. If you're someone with a strong preference for introversion, it's not that you're shy. It's not that you're not a people person. It's that you need the time. You need the time to be alone or with a small group of people so that you can prepare for the meeting and process what happens during the meeting. You might consider not having back-to-back meetings on your calendar, at least not too many of them. Instead, maybe 15 minutes before a meeting to prepare your thoughts, 15 minutes, 30 minutes after a meeting to digest what you've heard and to do some of the follow-ups with the items that come to you that you didn't do during the meeting. Those might be some really important best practices for you, and they would help you recharge your energy. So when you do go into the third meeting of the day, you're not exhausted. Something else you could consider doing before the meeting, it's often helpful to do power poses. That gives you energy. So all by yourself, and you could do this with me wherever you are right now. A power pose is where you stand up, and from the center line of your body, if you imagine your body being split vertically head to toe, that's your center line. A power pose just takes you bigger and wider and further away from that center line. So your shoulders go back, your feet get spread apart, your head tips up, you now are gesturing, and your gestures are wide with open palms. You could do this in front of other people. It makes you look like you're very confident. But you can also do it all by yourself because it's good for restoring energy and confidence right before you go into a meeting. Okay, now one thing more that you might consider before you go into the meeting, one other type of preparation, would be to evaluate yourself, your mood, your energy level, your assumptions, your emotional triggers before you go into that meeting. Don't belabor this. Don't spend a lot of time on it, but spend just a few minutes thinking about what might happen in that meeting. After you've thought about it and not gotten yourself worked up, the point is not to be stressed about it, but just to be proactively anticipating what you think will happen, especially within yourself. You're going to then focus on the positive outcomes and what you can do in the meeting to steer toward those positive outcomes. So if you feel like the meeting is going to be a waste of time and everybody's going to be talking over you and nobody's going to hear a word you have to say because they're moving so fast, and you're going to feel frustrated, if you identify all of those types of things before the meeting and then focus on the positive outcome you want, I want, for example, in this meeting, I want to make sure they understand the importance of this report that they aren't completing. And nobody seems to understand why it's so important. That's my outcome that I want from this meeting. Having prepared for it, knowing how you might get emotionally worked up over it, thinking about the right place to insert it in the meeting and how other people might react, you'll just be better able, you'll be more likely to go into it with that opportunity. You might even talk to the person who prepares the agenda if it's something of that magnitude and ask for a specific agenda item to be set aside. Preparation for a lot of people with an introversion preference makes a great deal of difference. I'd like to talk now about another type of meeting. I won't spend as much time on it, but oftentimes we get thrust into networking situations. And networking has a lot of value. I'm making a big generalization here, but a lot of those executives who I coach, even at the senior levels, they deliberately avoid networking situations. They don't sign up for conferences. They don't go to Chamber of Commerce meetings. They don't spend as much time as others might when they are in those situations. And they're missing opportunities. So despite the discomfort, let's talk about networking. The reasons to do it is that as a leader, no matter what your level, as someone who leads others, you do need connections. You need your own network to develop. So making those connections is vitally important. And not only to you, but to others. You have a unique perspective, a unique set of skills and experience. You have something to offer others. So this is not something selfish that you could just opt out of. I could live without it. But before you're going down that path, think about the work you do, the people who do the same kinds of work who you could be networking with, the others on your team who need you to access and bring in experience and ideas from elsewhere. And if you're thinking about long-term your career, the progression up the career ladder, a circle of influence is helpful there too, both inside and outside your own organization. Comfortable and good at networking, it also helps you develop some of those techniques for recharging quickly and powering through times when you can't recharge and your introversion tendencies are not serving you as well as you want them to. Your network can help you with that. Now, here's just one other reason. I certainly believe that there are benefits of networking beyond going out and finding a new job, but should the time ever come when you are looking for a new job, I think that's a pretty big number. 70% of all jobs are found through networking. So to be networking ahead of time, it's like digging your well before you're thirsty. You're getting the network in place before you actually need it. And networking will make you more efficient no matter what you're doing, job hunting or just about anything else. And it will make you more effective too because it increases your access, your influence. Networking, just like everything we talked about with meetings, these are all learned skills. These are not personality characteristics that a few select people are naturally born with. These are learned skills. These are choices, behavioral choices that you can make. And the best news of all is that you don't even have to be very good at those behavioral choices. It's not about quality. It's about quantity. It's about frequency. The more often you approach someone and introduce yourself, the better you'll become at it and the more comfortable you'll be. So it's just about frequency. It does take a minimum of 15 days, 2+ weeks, to form a new habit. So you've got to do it over and over again for it to become something that you do without having to think about it, without it being so uncomfortable. When you meet people, another thing that makes it a learned skill and a replicatable behavior is that you can make it less about you. It doesn't have to be about you. That way you won't feel like it's the spotlight on you personally. Make it about the event, make it about the company, make it about the profession, make it about the setting, the weather. It can be about virtually anything and does not have to be about you. Now, people might eventually ask questions about you, but you can even delay that by asking questions about them. So if part of your discomfort in networking is that you don't want to talk about yourself, well, you don't have to. There are lots of other things that you can do instead. Here are some things not to do. If you find yourself at a networking event or at a company function, these are the things not to do. To be more effective, to get better at networking and to get those advantages, don't hang out with the same people that you already know. That's going to be what you want to do. It might be what your habit has conditioned you to do, but you're not getting any benefits if you're hanging out with the same people you always hang out with. So don't limit yourself to them, and don't limit yourself to people you think that you're supposed to know. It doesn't just have to be the president of the organization or the people inside your own company. Anybody, everybody who you happen to brush up against. You're in the drink line. Who's in front of you? Who's behind you? Those are people that you might find benefit in knowing. And you'll get lots of frequency points as you introduce yourself to them and strike up some conversations. That's all practice. So you're going for quantity over quality. You're going to mix it up. You don't have to worry about what to say. Not at all. You don't necessarily have to be good at small talk. Just be curious and interested. And whatever comes to you out of your own natural curiosity or your natural interest about any topic, well, that's good fodder for networking. Maybe it's that you have a hobby. Maybe your hobby is gardening. So you meet someone and you say to them, "Hello, my name is Deb. I happen to enjoy gardening. Are you a gardener?" And if they say no, well, then they're going to tell you something else that they are interested in. If they say yes, you've just made a friend, not just an acquaintance, but you can start wherever you want to. It's all okay. Don't limit yourself by thinking that there are certain rules and regulations that you have to abide by. When you get started, it's going to flow really naturally if you are able, for that brief moment of discomfort, to give a firm handshake and to look someone straight in the eye. Have prepared, in case they ask, have a little elevator speech, a couple of sentences about the work that you do. Don't worry that you have to do incessant small talk. It's a good icebreaker. How about that weather today? Or what do you think of this event? Right? Those are often opening points, but ask a question that shows interest in the other person. Where are you from? What do you like about this company? What brings you to this event? Any of those kinds of questions will expand the conversation and keep it going beyond the small talk. And with those kinds of questions, you're going to find something that's of mutual interest or something that's completely different and not of mutual interest. But if you're curious and if your aim is to get acquainted with someone, even though it wouldn't normally be of interest, maybe for the next 2 minutes, there is some interest because it's not something familiar to you. You're just learning and going for frequency, not quality here. Here are some additional tips. Right? Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. I think a lot of times networking events are hairy, scary because we overcomplicate it. We think we're going to have to remember everyone's name and know everything that's going on. That's not really the case. The people that you truly connect with, the ones that you want to stay connected with, well, that's when you exchange a business card. Don't just collect all of them, but make it something meaningful, or jot down someone's name, or right then and there, connect with them on LinkedIn, whatever you do to maintain your connections. If it's somebody that you want to continue getting to know, send a little something. An article. This reminds me of the conversation we were having on Monday this week. I thought of you when I saw this. Or a follow-up question. You know, I've been thinking about that movie that you mentioned, and I was just wondering, what was the name of that? I forgot the name, but it's the one that you mentioned that had Jack Nicholson in it. Keep the conversation going. It doesn't end at the event. Do some trial and error. Everything I'm telling you works for some, doesn't work for others, but you can decide what works for you and replicate that. It's all about the frequency. So keep practicing, keep finding new ways, and wherever you are, meet a stranger because that will help you to feel more comfortable with it over the long term. And then take some space to recharge. If you're doing this all the time, everywhere you go, a smile, a hello, a simple question. It just opens up many things that you would never, ever expect. I've scored a lot of friendships and a lot of new accounts and a lot of learning on airplanes sitting next to strangers. And that's not just because I'm an extroverted person. I'm not always the one who strikes up the conversation. And I've met many an introvert who just happened to ask a question or talk to me about something for a moment, and it turned into something much, much more. Building that network means that you have it when you need it. Now, who do you network with? Well, everybody, right? Not just the people at the top, not just the ones who you think are going to be valuable to you, not just the ones that you can help, but everybody has a network too. And even if they're not the person who might, let's say, hire you for a future job, they have in-laws and cousins and friends and colleagues and former workplaces where they've been. Everybody has an extensive network, and you just never know who might be the right person to open a door for you, or who you could open a door for in the future. Okay, last but not least, no matter what type of organization that you're in, no matter what kind of setting you're in, these are the kinds of things that you might say. You'll find the ones that are most comfortable for you, but as you're looking at these, whichever one resonates with you, whichever one feels most natural to you, that's the one that makes a good starting point. Imagine yourself at a networking event, and imagine yourself meeting a stranger and saying one of these things to that stranger. And then imagine where the conversation could go from there. It's an infinite number of possibilities. And just being equipped and prepared and thinking only about one or two questions that you could ask to make it easier, that's the right place to start. Last but not least, here we go. Let me just wrap this up. I'm looking for any more questions that you might have. Go ahead and post those now or be in touch with me later. You're welcome to email me. I put my email in the audience announcements there. My website's on screen now. We do provide one-to-one coaching, and we do provide lots of work to help teams be more effective in communicating with each other. But I also just enjoy conversations with people. So if you have an interest in following up on anything that we've talked about today, if you have any additional tips that you'd share for people who are introverted, if you would like to just learn more about the services we offer or anything that we do at People First Productivity Solutions, give me a call. Send me an email. I'd like to be in touch. I'd like to connect. And I hope that you'll go ahead and post a review of this particular workshop and then go to LinkedIn and connect with me there.